Dracula Chapter 14. So again, you have read the text, and we are just going to look at some salient points. So a brief overview. In this chapter, Mina reads Jonathan's journal. She also meets Van Helsing. Jonathan meets Van Helsing. And finally, Van Helsing asks Seward to believe that Lucy is in fact responsible for the attack on the children in Hampstead. So we start off this chapter 14 with Mina Harker's journal dated the 23rd of September. So I want you to think back and remind yourselves of when the newspaper article was describing the Bloofer lady. So this is the day after that newspaper article has been published. So Mina realizes that her husband has been doing quite well, all right, and she decides she is going to read Jonathan's journal. She actually fears that perhaps he has brain fever, that perhaps he is a bit mad. She also is clearly prepared to transcribe the journal. She is going to take the shorthand, as we know, which she turns into these papers that we talked about in the epigraph, but she chooses not to tell Jonathan at this point that she is going to be transcribing the shorthand. The reason she needs to transcribe that becomes apparent when she gets a letter from Van Helsing on the 24th of September asking to meet her because he would like to find out additional information about Lucy. On the 25th of September, Mina sends him a telegram saying, "Absolutely, come to Exeter. I'll be happy to meet with you." She, based on her journal entry on the 25th of September, Mina clearly feels guilty because she's kept Lucy's somnambulism a secret. But she's also very pleased at this point that she has in fact typed up Jonathan's journal, because that way she can give it to Van Helsing to read. So we go through a description of Van Helsing as written by Mina, and immediately she regards him as a friend, and this is evident. So when he tells her about Lucy's diary, Mina gives him Jonathan's journal, which of course Van Helsing's very, very excited about, and he asks about her husband, and of course Mina describes what happened in London, where they came across the younger Dracula, and she tells Van Helsing, in fact, she does trust him with her husband's diary or journal, but she doesn't think he'll actually believe it. So when she first meets Van Helsing, she itemizes his appearance, and she tells us it was a very strange meeting, but that the man is of medium weight, strongly built, with his shoulders set back of a broad, deep chest, and a neck well balanced on the trunk, as the head is on the neck. The poise of the head strikes one at once as indicative of thought and power. The head is noble, well-sized, broad, and large behind the ears. The face, clean-shaven, shows a hard, square chin, a large, resolute, mobile mouth, a good-sized nose, rather straight, but with quick, sensitive nostrils that seem to broaden as the big, bushy brows come down and the mouth tightens. The forehead is broad and fine, rising at first almost straight and then sloping back over two bumps or ridges wide apart, such a forehead that the reddish hair cannot possibly tumble over it, but falls naturally back to the sides. Big, dark blue eyes are set widely apart and are quick and tender or stern with the man's moods. So if I cast your mind back to the whole idea of using physiognomy, the Victorian belief that you could, based on a person's physical appearance, you could judge whether or not they were a criminal, she's used that to describe Van Helsing. So she believes him to be dominant, powerful man, but at the same time a man of good intentions and honest. And I need you to note that some of her description, especially the bit about the forehead, absolutely mimics Jonathan's description of Count Dracula in chapter 2. The major difference between the two descriptions, however, is the eyes, because, of course, here Van Helsing is described with eyes that are not cruel. Rather, they are good and kind, but they have the potential to be stern. So again, I'm reminding you that perhaps Van Helsing is Dracula's doppelganger. At the same time, it could also be argued, remember, that Jonathan could be Dracula's doppelganger. So Mina hands over the diary, and firstly, she's got a great sense of humour, so she hands him over the shorthand one, and he goes, "Oh, I don't know how to read this." And then at the end, she says, "By this time, my little joke was over, and I was almost ashamed, so I took the typewritten copy from my work basket and handed it to him." So he describes her. He's very impressed, Van Helsing is, by Mina's cleverness. She's able to use modern methods, which at the time was shorthand, and he is surprisingly ignorant of it. So again, please, it's a reminder that Stoker is writing a cutting-edge novel which is up to date with the latest techniques such as shorthand. So we've got this kind of focus on 19th century modern life, modern technological development, which, remember, of course, is quite an important theme. And what does it do? It defines Mina as this person who's very resourceful, and it also, I think, emphasizes that Van Helsing is older. So he's quite a bit older than the rest of the characters. They're probably all late 20s, maybe early 30s, whereas he's probably in his 50s. But the importance is not that he is old, but that he has the wisdom of the past. And of course, remember, age and youth is quite a focus and a theme in this story. So Mina's skills are important because she is the organizational her organizational secretarial skills are important to the communication of all the major characters. She's the one who constructs the narrative as a whole by bringing together all the accounts that they have recorded. Okay. We also realize that she has got unbelievably detailed knowledge of railway timetables, which serves two purposes. Not only is, maybe three, not only is Stoker showing she's an ideal match for Jonathan, who seems to be a bit obsessed with railways, but it's also showing that she's got this great attention to detail, and is going to come in handy later in the novel, this knowledge. Okay. During their conversation, Van Helsing goes on to say there are good women still left to make life happy, good women whose lives and whose truths may make good lesson for the children that are to be. So he's been constantly praising Mina throughout their discussion, throughout their first meeting. And I just want to draw your attention to this quote because it's the first explicit reference in the novel to the fact that Mina could possibly become a mother. Okay. Again, it reinforces the difference between Lucy and Mina because this is a phrase that never would have been applied to Lucy. Okay. So Van Helsing goes away and reads the diary or Jonathan's journal and sends on the 25th of September at 6 o'clock to reassure Mina that Jonathan's experiences are very real. And I think this is an important aspect because, of course, Jonathan has up until this point believed that he went mad. So this kind of outside affirmation of what he's experienced is very important. In fact, when we go on to read his journal, which follows, because he's decided to rewrite in his journal again, he says, "It was the doubt as to the reality of the whole thing that knocked me over." So Van Helsing's confidence in the fact that he believes Jonathan's journal, he believes it to be true, is what validates Jonathan's experience and allows for Jonathan's restoration. Okay, so he's able to come back and be the man that he once was. It also gets rid of any doubts that Mina might have had, and it also restores her. So Jonathan's restored to his confidence and his manhood. Mina is restored to Mina's belief in her husband's sanity is restored. And I think it's important to note that Van Helsing is also restored. His whole raison d'etre, as he said earlier, was to heal. And he was unable to heal Lucy. He did his best, obviously, but the external factors thwarted him. But he was unable to heal Lucy. But he seems to have helped heal Jonathan, and I think that kind of restores him. And I think he finds Mina almost his sense of hope. He draws hope from her, which is important. And remember, she's going to be inspirational to all the men in the party. So in this meeting with Jonathan, Van Helsing asks for additional information. Jonathan gives him further papers to read. And of course, on his train ride home, Van Helsing picks up the newspaper and reads about the attack of the Bloofer lady on the children in Hampstead. We then return to Dr. Seward's diary. It's the 26th of September. And he opens with, truly there is no such thing as finality. So Seward is resuming his diary, and his opening statement is one of complaint. Okay. He is not a happy bunny. Van Helsing has come out home and pointed out that the injured people, the story of the injured children, pointed out that they have neck wounds, and Dr. Seward is, he's big enough to say, yes, no, he can see there's a coincidence, and they could, kind of like coincidentally be linked to Lucy. But he doesn't believe it is Lucy. So Van Helsing actually challenges him. He says to Seward, explain Lucy's blood loss. And he can't do this. And ironically, Van Helsing doesn't give him the answer either. Instead, he praises him, keeps saying to him, you are a clever man. And he says, you are a clever man, you clever man. He repeats this quite regularly. And he says, though, that you are too prejudiced. So he's highlighting to Seward that he is in fact ignoring important mysteries. And he feels that Seward lacks interest beyond the scientific explanation of the world. So he feels that Seward is not able to look to the supernatural, that he has to ground all of his ideas in science. And in fact, he ascertains that, of course, Seward doesn't even believe in corporeal transference. No, not in materialization. No, not in astral bodies. No, not in the reading of thought. No, nor in hypnotism. Okay, so it's quite interesting because he talks about here how he says, so you don't believe in any of this. You don't believe in shape-shifting or anything. So he leads him through this consideration, these various extraordinary phenomena, kind of in the way that a teacher might lead a student through a difficult concept. And of course, quite interesting because, of course, Seward easily falls into the position of the student who really wants to impress, but is still struggling with the idea. Okay. So it's significant that Seward rejects the pseudo-scientific phenomena, the idea of corporeal transference, materialization, but he seems to think that hypnotism is credible. Van Helsing also seems to be asking Seward to take into account of phenomena associated with something called theosophy, which was a mystical philosophical view that was popularized in the late Victorian era. It's pretty much a combination of philosophy and theology. Okay, hence the word theosophy. Sorry. But Stoker knew something about this esoteric and this kind of alleged scientific attempt to combine religion with the supernatural. So that's why he has mentioned it again, showing us that, or the reader, that he is a very modern and forward-thinking. Okay, so Van Helsing provides a rhetorical list of a dozen or so of nature's eccentricities and possible impossibilities. And Seward's bewildered by this. And he asks, he says, but tell me the thesis. He wants this clear, basic idea. He wants to understand, what is Van Helsing trying to get at? What does Van Helsing want of him? And Van Helsing says, I want you to have faith. He says, I want you to believe. And then on the final page of this chapter goes on, says, I want you to believe in things you cannot, and goes on to give this definition of faith, that faculty which enables us to believe things which we know to be untrue. Now, it's quite interesting because this definition appears to have been in general circulation at the time the book was published. And it goes on to say, for one, I follow that man. He meant that we shall have an open mind and not let a little bit of truth check the rush of a big truth. And he goes on and he says he is unable to recall the name of the American, this is Van Helsing, unable to recall the name of the American who made the statement about faith. This is actually kind of a private joke. Stoker is in fact referring to the American author Mark Twain, who he was good friends with. He knew personally. Mark Twain is said to have made that statement. And this is meant to be ironic and humorous. It's in a humorous aside that should Mark Twain pick up his novel, he will in fact know that he has been mentioned. So this is a fairly short chapter in terms of major events and detailed analysis. Of course, there is quite a bit of close word level analysis that could be done, especially when looking at faith and looking at all the listings that Van Helsing uses to demonstrate the supernatural. And of course, since looking at the supernatural, those are good passages to comment on. So it might be a very good idea for you just to go through those passages, and if they identify any of the people who are mentioned, like Charcot, talks about Methuselah, go through why the Pampas, in the Pampas, so go through and look at what Van Helsing has listed and do a little bit of research to find out as to why what he has listed can be regarded as supernatural.